Thank you. A very wonderful Chag Sameach to everybody. Do you hear me? Do you hear me? Louder. That means you don't hear me. I'll try. Oh. Listen. Oh, this wise guy. Now do you hear me? Okay. Okay, Ruff.
Chag Sameach, everybody. I just want to say that this is, besides some broadcasting that we've done together, I very rarely have the occasion to sit next to Karen on such an informal basis.
I thought you've been married for over 30 years. What do you mean you can sit next to me on an informal occasion?
In public.
In public.
Yeah, you're right. Why am I saying that? And I'm just wondering how I'm going to work out.
Don't worry. We'll take care of it.
We'll take care of it.
Okay. So, tonight we're going to tell you the story of how we began. And basically, how we began, that's how the center began. And this story goes back about 40 years. And now remember...
40, you mean 42 years?
40.
I know Karen doesn't want to really... but we all know she's only 42.
You know what that means? Anyhow, 42 years ago. Now, remember that our marriage probably, if you ask anybody, it could never happen. Because we come from not parallel universes, but absolutely contrary ways of life. Rob, from an early age, went to school, Hebrew school, from an Orthodox background. I went through religious training all the way through his life. And me, I was a fourth generation American born who only knew about religion in that the sense that, let's assume that my parents or my mother, I mean, they were born Jewish, but that was the be all and the end all of my religious education. I tell when I was perhaps around 9 years of age when my mom decided I needed school till I was 5, put me into a yeshiva, and I promptly went and smacked the heck out of a rabbi, and that was the end of my religious education. So, two different worlds, totally and completely different. In any event, I was in school, and I was looking to do something as a part-time basis, and my husband over here, at that stage in his life, was in business. And I went to work for him, or for a company in which was owned by him at that time. And I wasn't particularly crazy about this person. That person, because this person is another lifetime. That person was a very different human being, and was not, I don't know, should I say wasn't spiritual? I don't mean it that way. Well, how do I say it that it makes sense?
I think that would be
That's
correct.
right.
I was mainstream.
He was mainstream, which means not spiritual.
Which was not spiritual.
Okay, at that time. And of course, you know, I couldn't understand the conflict between business and religion at that time either. But me, I was always from the time I could remember, I was involved or trying to be involved in things that was somehow beyond the five senses. At 21, I was a medium. I was able to do, distance healing and all kinds of different things at a very early stage. We used to work in that time, in that field, me and a few people and a few guides and people that were close to me. In any event, let's go again now, 9 years later. We've left, I'm far gone from school and now doing things on my own. And I was at that time involved in an organization, and we needed somebody to be a typist of all things, to be a typist. But we needed someone that would be perfect for the job, which means that she didn't know about anything. She wasn't very smart. She was an excellent typist and didn't care about anything else. And I knew the perfect person because in this place where I had worked many years before, there was a woman, a spinstress, who I would assume was still a spinstress. And I said, well, if she's there, it's not a problem. We'll offer X amount of dollars more and we'll bring her over to where we needed her. So I call up and I speak to this girl, Carmela, remember?
She's still there?
She's probably still there. Still typing. And I asked her about whether she wanted, whether she was interested, whatever she was making. I would raise her salary by X amount of dollars, and we really needed her, and she liked me, I liked her. It'd be great for her. The answer was she actually couldn't leave. And I said, by the way, do you ever see Mr. So-and-so? He says, well, you know, he's not here anymore. He's actually left business many, many years ago. But he gets his mail here. It still comes here. And he comes in every now and then and frequents the place just to say hello. I said, well, if you see him, say hi. Okay. She hangs up the phone and he walks through the door. And he walks through the door, and this was after Passover. On the third day of Passover of that year, his teacher leaves this world. Okay? Dies on the third day of Passover. He comes after the Shiva, the day after the Shiva. He walks into that office where he hasn't been in years and speaks to Carmela, who says to her, Karen called, call her back. So he picks up the phone and he calls me. And I wasn't thrilled to hear from him because I remember the person that I remembered, and that kind of a person was, you know, okay, but totally not connected, not spiritual at all, and not involved in anything that I would particularly want to be involved in. Hello, how are you? Da, 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 da. And he says to me, well, I left business many, many years ago. I've given up everything, and I've spent the last 8 years of my life learning with a teacher Kabbalah. Ding! Kabbalah. And I say to him, mind you, I say to him, what do you know about Kabbalah? And he answers me and he says, well, what do you know about Kabbalah? And I say to him, well, I know that it's the root of all studies, Jewish studies. I know it is the spiritual essence of most of creation, and I know that it's the root of most spiritualities, or most ways of spirituality. And then, don't ask me why I answered this way. I said to him, I got a deal for you. You teach me Kabbalah, and I work for free. That was the beginning, and I think the end of the first part of our relationship. And I have to tell you that from that moment, that night, when we sat together for the first time, until this day, between ourselves, the only thing we argue about is other people, not about ourselves. But in any event, to go on with the story, we met, we started to be together, we started to work, we started to learn. 4 weeks into this relationship, I meet him in the morning in New York City. Those of you that know New York, it's a place called Ratner's, and it's early morning, and we come there to have breakfast. And I meet him, and I said to him, I had this weird dream. Now remember, I don't speak Hebrew. I don't know Hebrew. I'm as far away to religion as a man is to the moon. But anyhow, I tell him, I had this weird dream. He said, what did you dream? He says, I don't know, I was sleeping, and suddenly this man came to me, and I described the man, exactly how he looked. And he looked exactly like the Rav's teacher, which I didn't know, because I didn't know the Rav's teacher. And I said, and he's standing there, and he was looking at me, and he put his hands over my head, and he said something in a language that I didn't understand, and when I ran to grab for his coat, he left and disappeared. He freaks out. And he says to me, he says, you know, I was coming to tell you that the relationship was over. Because last night when I went to sleep, I asked that my teacher would come to me and tell me whether I had the right to teach you or in fact to be with you at all. And he didn't come. And the fact that he didn't come to me was a sign that you and I were not going to be an item. But he came to me. That's the story. That's part B. Part C.
Part C. Does that mean we now continue with Part D?
I don't know. Do what you...
Part C was the difficult part of our relationship. Because at that time, I had continued with the tradition that was established both by my teacher and his teacher as well, and that was scholars, the old traditional way of excluding the public. And that was done because by my teacher and his teacher before him, because what they had done and what they had accomplished in their lifetime, for which they were lucky that they survived with their life, although they were physically abused here and there, was the fact that they had brought Kabbalah for the first time. At least the person who could read modern Hebrew, a translation and a commentary, which did not exist since the Zohar appeared 2,000 years ago. It just wasn't. It really wasn't there for the layman. But they both knew that what had happened 400 years before with Moses Luzzatto, in which not only was he banned, but he literally died a young man because his papers were burned and he had to repudiate. He was a Kabbalist, Moses Chaim Luzzatto, and his life was very difficult. And they felt that that's what would happen to both of them if they would press. They would press the issue of going beyond the fact that now any layman could now pick it up, and if nobody sees, let them read it. But it was available. While it wasn't stressed, in fact, our school that started 80 years ago was just that, a school for scholars, those who were learned, etc., and of course no women. They were excluded. And that's the way I thought, and that's the way we began. We began with that. We had the school in the old city of Jerusalem, and until one day, and we're there, just the two of us. I mean, nobody else involved. And Karen, as many of you know, said, "Why are we continuing this way? If the material is available, at least for the Israeli who can read modern day Hebrew, why not offer it to them publicly and seek out those people and let them know that this is available?" And I went into a whole blah 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 about it's dangerous. It is, I say, physically dangerous and emotionally abusive, and we would have a great deal of difficulties. Well, I didn't even realize
how difficult,
how quickly it would be abusive, that she wound up in the hospital with a brain concussion hit by a baseball bat. I mean, it was pretty rough. And then, of course, the abuse continued wherever we went. Somehow it was known wherever we're going to be, and there was abuse. And I remember once a close friend who was then somewhat helping us, said, well, maybe you ought to change the name. Don't use the
Don't call
word
it
Kabbalah. Just say spiritual. It's a spiritual organization. And I said at that time, I didn't think that was a road that should be taken. If we're afraid, if we have something to hide because it's not that popular, I said, well, I don't think so. And that was phase C, which probably was the most difficult years that we had to go through. Not that we're unhappy, not that we're sorry, because we realize now that had it not been for that period, then we wouldn't have to enjoy and to see the fruits of that labor, because nothing that is worthwhile comes easy in life. That which comes easy leaves easy. And so we continued on a very, very small scale, but making a little indent here and a little indent there, and always constantly, day in and day out, being abused both physically and, but more importantly, being abused on every level that one can dream of. And, but I have to say that once we had taken that step, we knew we had burnt the bridge that could bring us back to a past of tranquility. Nobody pays any attention to us, and just live a
nice, quiet
merry life, a merry and a quiet life after that. But we decided that we were going to burn that bridge, and that's not where we wanted to be. I have to say that despite the fact that Karen says that it was difficult for her because she came from an entirely different environment, culture, everything else that was so different from where I came from. However, once we had taken that step, it became more difficult only because of where I came from, and it's like I gave up that past. It wasn't easy. You grow up, your environment, your education totally is embraced with that kind of upbringing, and now you suddenly say goodbye because that's what we had to do. We no longer would be permitted to pray in that community, to hear the reading of the Torah, and wherever we went, wherever we moved, whenever we just want to go in at least on Shabbat, and that was the most and the least that we were able to do, is hear the Torah reading. But we had to immediately leave because some rabbi would get up and speak about us instead of a sermon. And that's how hot it was. It was very, not that today is a lot easier, but only today we pay less attention. And that was that period of time.
So what do you think a soulmate relationship's about?
I think that's where you have our relationship in any event. The story itself speaks about it. Firstly, Av, father. Ab means father. Why is this related to father? Because the sun, which is the expression, the maximum expression of physical light in this universe, is a clue. That's why Abraham the patriarch gave it the name Av. It was just a clue. Not because he had to name the baby and so he gave it the name Av, but it was a clue that in this month there is that expression of the Creator in its entirety. Now, what is the expression of the Creator? The expression of the Creator is, as we learn in Kabbalah, as much as the calf wants to suckle from its mother, so much more does the cow want to provide the nourishment to the calf. More so than the calf. And from that we learn that while it doesn't appear like the Creator is pushing and making every effort to make sure that we can have the contentment of Yetzirah which He represents, because of love, because that's what the Creator is about. More so than what we want or what we need. And we know because we don't dial, and that's why we don't. But that's what Av means, that fatherly expression, which means in turn love for children. The father has that love for children.
So are you saying that in the soulmate relationship, each one needs to give more to the other than the other wants?
In the way of love. What does that mean, the way of love?
Right.
We've always had differences. We've never can say, no, we've always agreed with each other. No. In fact, it's not easy. I'm a Leo and
I'm a
you're
Libra.
a Libra. You know.
Perfectly fine.
That's right. She's too fast for me, and I'm too fiery for her. So that subconsciously should, but there was a love. There was a love that when that love exists, and what does love mean? Without an agenda. That's love. I know in Beverly Hills, what do they say? Oh, I love you, darling. You know, but that's Beverly Hills. Everybody loves everybody. But the minute that person has walked out of the room, heaven help him or heaven help her. But that's not love. That's not love. Love is that despite the difficulties that two people are experiencing, what always remains in the minds of both is the fact that each one loves the other. And when you have that, which by the grace of God we did have it, because we could never survive otherwise. The pressure was so heavy, you just can't imagine. I don't want to just sit here and tell you how wonderful we were, that we withstood the onslaught. I could never say.
Well, I got to tell you that it was a little bit strange, and I can understand people thinking that way. Remember, this man over here is not the man that you see sitting here. This other man that I married wore a long black coat. They call it a kapata, a long black coat with a big belt that went around his waist with a big black fur hat. And I wore a miniskirt. It seemed strange. So, because I didn't know why I couldn't wear a miniskirt. He looked strange to me. So, go ahead.
Yeah. We finally kind of adjusted.
Yeah, we adjusted.
But that really concerned the outside world. They could not understand it, and now, in retrospect, we look back and we say, you know what?
I wouldn't understand.
I wouldn't understand it either. You know, but at that time, these were the things that, fortunately or unfortunately, we paid very little attention to. Funds were at its barest minimum, but it never, I can say,
Didn't matter.
Never. Not even on one occasion, like someone says, our good friend here, I won't mention his name, he'll be embarrassed. He says, wasn't there one moment in these 40 years, wasn't there one moment where you said,
forget about it.
Forget about it. You know, how long are we required to go on with this kind of relationship, which continues today, but we, of course, we don't have to pay attention to it. You know, like 40 years later, they're still writing the same thing that they wrote about 40 years later. And I remember, that's another difference between the two of us. I was being interviewed up in Canada by the...
Oh, my God.
And the guy says, you know, why are they why they talk like that so badly about you? I said, let's say 40 years ago, I murdered people.
Yeah, let's say I'm a...
That would be,
Let's say I'm a robber. Let's
the
say
worst.
I murder people. Isn't there tshuva? Isn't there repentance?
I mean, let's say I repented.
And God.
And I'd never do it again.
He tells this to a reporter.
And so the reporter was going to write, literally, I couldn't imagine at that time, he was going to write
that he was a murderer,
that he was
robber,
a murderer,
but he was a thief.
But now he's repented. But that wasn't what I wanted.
Oh, yeah. That wasn't what he wanted to say. Rob says what he wants to say and sometimes forgets to hear the question. Especially to a reporter. It's wonderful. Things that have come out are incredible.
Yeah, okay. That's true. That's true. That's true. But
what would you say to the people here? What would you think is the most important aspect? Like, for instance, I think the most important aspect of a relationship to last has to be the idea of going out of the relationship and doing things either for the community or for each other, or something that the two do together to make a positive for the world at large. However that is. But there must be that aspect in a relationship for it to work. There also must be, as far as I'm concerned, an interdependency, which means, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. There must be, hello. Okay.
No.
Hello. Okay. There must be an interdependentship in a relationship, meaning you don't love somebody because of anything. In other words, you don't need them to be generous, to be kind. You need them to do their job in the best way they can. And you do your part in the best way that you can, but working interdependently so that each one of you are like the North and the South Pole. Each one of you have your place in the relationship that is in itself whole. And by being whole into itself, then and only then can you generate outward to create that bond that causes that circle. And that circle is what makes a relationship remain long after the sexuality, the beginning parts, which are full of physicality, are involved. And to make it last, and that it should generate, and that it should continue for 30 years, 40 years, 50 years, the only thing that can do that is by being able to be your own person in that same relationship, and both of you pushing the same way to go outside of the relationship to do something for the outside world. Without that, there is no relationship. There's no permanency in a relationship. If there's anything less than that, then it's a desire to receive. A man is wealthy, the woman is not. She marries him because she needs. A man is handsome, he's outgoing, and the woman is not, then she needs that part to fulfill her own personality. When there is a fulfillment involved in the other person, it's not pure love. There must be a totality within that particular person. And in that totality, there can be another half, which is equally total. And together, they can work to generate light. And that light is what we call soulmate. Because in order to have a soulmate, there must involve the soul. And the soul is only light.
I think the clapping was very much in tune with what I was just going to say. I really haven't got much to say after that. It isn't really that complex, and we learn in Kabbalah. We strive for the simplicity of things so that the whole world can understand it and not be subject to different interpretations. It's really that simple. Love cannot have an agenda. Cannot have an agenda. I love because for reasons. If both parties and And soulmates are, incidentally, especially in this era that we live in, if both parties are interested in spirituality, even if it's a spiritual path is not Kabbalah, but they're both involved in a spiritual path, it means that is going to bring them, that will bring them close. It's not that, you try to go and find, like the Ari HaKadosh said, and that's how we knew it fitted in perfectly into our situation, because we were oceans apart, worlds apart. There was so much opposition, I must say, to our getting married. It's incredible. And so we fulfilled all of the requirements. But despite everything, it had nothing to do with it. The difficulties, the joys, had nothing to do with just a feeling of caring and sharing with each other. It just didn't involve a reason. It was just there. However, what I think Karen tried to say, and what I believe is imperative and is subject to that condition, is that we do not build a relationship or think we have a relationship based on, look what this party can do for me and what I can do for that party, and that's how our lives become fulfilled and rich. It has nothing to do with that. The two of you feel that chemistry, it's there. Without going into now that intellectual trip, which is what it's all about, when we discuss, well, we have the same things in common, or we don't have the same things in common. Well, I can tell you that we were distance apart. Oh, of course, she brought me to her way of thinking, but to me, astrology was hogwash. And she wrote poetry, which I never cared for, I have to tell you the truth. Today I appreciate it.
Not that he didn't care for my poetry. He didn't care for poetry.
I didn't care for poetry, and she would read me her poetry. It was so beautiful, but I didn't care for it. So it wasn't poetry that brought us together. It wasn't because we both had a wonderful chart that says we're going to be together, because I'm telling you now the extreme of where I was coming from. I mean, to me, astrology meant nothing.
That was 9 years before, Don.
Yeah.
That's the part that was before.
But that, again, was not the force that brought me together. It was an idea that Karen was there before I even begun my spiritual path. She was on it long before I was. But then I came into it. For whatever reason, there I was, knowing she was on a spiritual path, but not making any connection for those 8 years that I was with and I had not seen her now. About that period of 8 years, I lost any contact with Karen at that point. And now she told you the story, how we got together. I mean, it doesn't work that way, but it does work that way. When the light sees fit, light brings the two people together, whether it's a partnership, whether it's friends, whether it's man and wife. The light does that. That's the benefit of being involved in a spiritual path. And that's why most of the world, I should say in the entire world, there are just one or two instances that I even know amongst millions where they are real soulmates. Where they are real soulmates. So, a good step in the right direction is to seek out a partner, business, if you so be it, or whatever other relationship. And there are many different sorts of relationships. There's a better chance of having love without an agenda, between people who are spiritual. Chag Sameach.
Chag Sameach.